Welcome back to podcast 126. I am Stephen. I have the honour of having Colin with me as well. How are you, Colin?
I'm really good. Thanks a lot, Stephen.
Excellent. And you'll notice that Thomas isn't with us because me and Colin in the chill out area, we've been talking for about a couple of hours now. I think Thomas realised what type of conversation this was actually going to be, and it's going to be a proper geek fest right now. So listen up, and we're talking about Mammoth P, phosphorus solubilizing bacteria, and it might sound to the people, to Thomas's fans, it might sound like it's really boring, but trust me, this is in every grow shop within 2 years in the UK. For the slower shops, maybe a bit longer, but you will be using this product, and if you're not using it, you will hear about it. So stay tuned, and I'll be back with Colin after the intro, and we're going to get right into it. What's going on, homies? You're listening to NPK Live, the Hydroponics podcast. You're listening to NPK Live. To all the listeners around the world, you're listening to NPK Live. So, Colin, you're in the UK. It's a pleasure. How have you found UK so far?
It's been thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah.
Traveling this last couple of weeks and to have another week.
Yeah.
Talking to stores, talking to growers, understanding what's going on. And again, Mammoth P is a product that I developed at the university. Our team developed it at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. And it's a liquid, organic, microbial soil additive. Works really well in hydroponic systems and cocoa systems and soil systems. And it significantly increases plant yield by at least 16%.
Yeah, so that's why, in a nutshell, you need to listen to this podcast on this lovely Sunday afternoon. Well, I'm guessing it's lovely. It's actually coming into the water. It's probably pissing down when people are listening right now. But I want to make a couple of points. First of all, though, the difference, just dead quick, off subject. How have you found the UK to the US hydroponic scene? How has it been different?
So I think it's just the timing. In the UK, it's probably it's like the US 5 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
And it makes it even more exciting because the people and growers that are on the ground doing what they're doing right now in the UK are the industry.
Yeah.
And it's about that sacrifice. It's about that risk. And with high risk comes high reward. I am 100% convinced that this is going to look like the U.S. 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And I want everyone to keep on doing a great job and keep up the good fight, because it's an amazing time, and congratulations.
Yeah, man, I love that. So, like, getting on the plane from Colorado to the UK, it's like the world's first time machine. It's a hydroponic time machine to 5 years ago in the US.
That's totally true.
I love that. Now, listen, I'm fully sold on Mammoth P. It's two things. It's the second product in the history of NPK that's been on the shelves before there's been 9 months worth of testing by myself. And the reason for that is because of science. Now, Colin's got multiple published studies on the effectiveness of Mammoth P and the phosphorus solubilizing bacteria. Plus, Instagram is just going crazy for it right now. So I'm listening to what the growers are saying on Instagram, and they're loving it, and you just can't ignore it. I thought for this product, normally we're about 9 months behind with products. Other shops just jump onto products before really using them or testing them, and we'll just sell because there's a bit of a market. Whereas we like to test, make sure that we've used the product first and foremost, and that it works, and that we're giving our customers honest information. We can say it does this and does that, but when you've got science to back you up, then you've half done my job for me, so that you've got straight into the shop. And the point that I'm trying to make is that when something's backed up by science and the scientific method, you're going to notice that a lot of these other products that have managed to swindle away in, and I use the word swindle because they're not basing anything on trials, not basing the research on anything. If they even are doing research, they're finding a gateway to make money, and they're in there straight in. And what we were saying before is that your reputation, you and the two other PhD soil microbiologists, you've got a good reputation, a great reputation in your arena, soil microbiology. You're not about to throw that away over a product. You're going to make sure that it works first, aren't you? Yeah,
and I really appreciate that perspective. And that's how we think about everything. As scientists, you put your name on the line when you're doing any of your science. And at the end of the day, I don't really think about that or focus on it. I think about doing things right and using scientific rigor, because that's how I was trained as a PhD soil microbiologist. That's just how we roll, quite frankly. And when we thought about, initially thinking how we could do more to bring value to farmers, because our research and our science, we always said, hey, we're bringing value to farmers. But one day we realized, we're writing a bunch of papers. Mm-hmm. But the last time I talked to a farmer was never. Yeah. The last time I actually went out in the field and used my knowledge to help a farmer was never. Yeah. And so let's do something different. And we end up thinking about how we can actually make something that we can literally hand to a farmer and bring them value. And that's kind of was the beginning of Mammoth P.
Yeah, man. And there's a few of the super skeptics out there tend to say for the products that are in the hydroponics industry that, well, if the big agriculture isn't using it, well, I think the hydroponics industry is just trying to make money off it and this and that. But you made a brilliant point before. Big ag's been taken up. It's sold. Which companies? Oh, it's like your Monsantos, your Bayers, Syngenta. They pretty much own the agriculture industry now.
Yeah, that's right.
They?
It was a really educational experience for me, getting out and doing discovery. What we ended up doing is I always think about learning as like kind of understanding what I don't know. And the way I kind of learn things, especially in the agriculture space, is when I went out and talked to a couple hundred farmers to understand how they thought about things, to think about their pain points, to understand where we could bring them value with microbial technology. And through those interviews, I realized that, farmers are kind of controlled, unfortunately, in these larger food crops by the large agro conglomerates, the Syngentas, the Monsantos, the Bayers, BASF, all those companies. And I realized also that as a young scientist who had a pretty cool technology that I wanted to bring good and feed the world with, it was really hard or almost impossible to have any success in the traditional agriculture space without partnering with those agro conglomerates. And as soon as you do that, we also realized you lose complete control on the fate of your technology, and the values of those large corporations might not be aligned, or in many cases were not aligned with our company values and culture. And so the cannabis industry gave us, it's really interesting, a platform in an industry where our science could actually be used and we could actually bring value to growers, and we could control the fate of the technology and succeed as scientists who want to make a bigger impact by actually making a difference physically, by actually bringing value to growers.
And this is possibly a turning point where our industry potentially looked at the agriculture industry and was seeing what they were using. Let's grow our plants using what the big agriculture using. Now it might come to a point where big ag start looking at what we're using. So what you've done is you've come into a market to obviously, because it's such a good product, it's going to do wonders. But then big ag will be looking at the product and what it does for our plants and be like, oh, we need to use that. And then there's no sell. They've got to use it because of what it's doing in the hydroponics industry.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, we have a lot of high value crops that we're working in, not only cannabis, and we're 100% dedicated to cannabis. I'll be crystal clear about that. But we're also working with commercial tomato growers in Florida in the U.S. and strawberry growers in Salinas in California, huge outfits. And they saw what we were doing in the cannabis space, and they started doing some discovery. We started engaging them, and now they're using it in their facilities. And it's still research and development phases. It's 3 years of data, but they're seeing great results. And that speaks a lot.
Yeah, man. Nice. So the basically the points that I'm trying to get across is Mammoth P is backed up, probably, the most backed up scientifically of any product in the hydroponics industry. You can go out very easy now. Go onto Mammoth P website, www.mammothmicrobes.com, and the paper's on there. If you like one of us and you're onto Google Scholar, then just type in Colin Bell and phosphorus solubilizing bacteria, and the big one comes up there. So these are really heavily into the science, and it's also something we also talked about nano, and it's where we've been trying to come in, do the science first, prove it to the science, and then just let the growers find out for themselves how good it is. So that's why you can tell I'm sold, because the science sold me.
Yeah.
But let's get right into Mammoth P. Where did it all come from? How did you find what happened?
Yeah, so this is a really kind of a cool story. Initially, about late 2013, we were kind of looking at what we were doing as a team and realized that we weren't making the impact that we felt like we should be. And so we decided to make a change. I was a research scientist at Colorado State University at the time. And so I ended up writing a grant and getting a grant to fund our ability to flip our lab from a fundamental or basic science lab into an applied science lab. And we started thinking about how to make technologies, how to make microbes that we could get in the hands of farmers, microbial technologies.
Yeah.
And to do that, we're first of all talking to hundreds of farmers to understand where there's pain points and where we could actually bring value with microbial technologies. And we focused on phosphorus.
Yeah.
And so the P in Mammoth P stands for phosphorus. The microbes in Mammoth P unlock bound nutrients, transforming phosphorus and micronutrients in many cases into bioavailable, plant-available forms. And that allows plants to naturally maximize plant phosphorus uptake, which they can allocate into harvestable, sellable yield, which is awesome. And it's at least 16% increase. But how do you do that? That's the question. You're like, okay, that's a cool idea and that's a cool statement.
Where did you find these microbes? Because there's a few billion to go through, isn't there?
That's right. And what we wanted to do, and we kind of highlighted this, and through all my academic research, I was always frustrated with the billions of microbes. Some are culturable, some aren't. And the question that our team always asked, and what we always were more focused on, because we thought this was the more interesting question, is what are they doing? Focusing on function. And I've read a lot of papers that I got frustrated with because it talked about all the microbes and all the species and that were in a particular soil, and then others that were in different soils. And that was the point of the paper. Hey, look at this diversity. And I think that's cool, but it's more cool when I understand what the microbes are doing. So all our research was focused on function. Yeah. And we decided to take that approach into developing microbes. And so we ended up deciding we don't care what microbes are there. We want to focus on function first, and then we'll evaluate what microbes are causing higher function as a secondary approach. So how did we make Mammoth P? We ended up collecting soils from across the U.S. in agriculture and natural systems to assess their ability to cycle phosphorus. Yeah. And so we wanted to grow up these microbes, and we actually wanted to treat product and these microbes as from a soil ecology perspective, which means we wanted to develop a product that had multiple species in it, a consortia, because we knew from all of our studies as soil microbiologists and microbial ecologists that single species are not effective in nature. You actually can't find any instant where there's a single microbial species. They work in consortia or communities. And so we knew that was the type of a technology that we needed to make. And we also wanted them to focus on function. We wanted to focus on phosphorus cycling. And we felt like if we could maximize phosphorus cycling through these microbial activities, we could bring a lot of value to growers by delivering the important macronutrient phosphorus to plants and maximize uptake. So
that was a big problem, wasn't it, in agriculture? So in research, you start with a problem, and how do you solve a problem? You go through different research, and the problem was that 70% of phosphorus was becoming bound and unavailable, becoming bound in unavailable forms. The plant can't take it up, so you're losing 70% of your money.
Yeah, it was really fascinating. As I was talking to farmers, talking to hundreds of farmers, we realized that the problem they were facing is that phosphorus was becoming horribly unavailable in their soils, and up to 70% as farmers were adding phosphorus in their soils, it was becoming immediately unavailable. So that's horrible nutrient use efficiency, and that's one of the huge problems in agriculture in general, is depleting soil fertility and really poor nutrient use efficiency. And we knew that we could deploy targeted microbial technologies to improve nutrient use efficiency, to deliver phosphorus in particular to plants. Yeah,
mini armies, Thomas would call them mini armies of phosphorus solubilizing bacteria to get in there and break it all apart and get it back into the plant.
That's right. That's what microbes do. They actually do that in nature. Yeah. And what we want to do is to deploy them to do it better in agriculture systems.
You just wanted the best microbes, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the Olympic. So what you've done is you've created the Olympic Games of microbes.
That's right.
You've got all the best athletes in one arena, and then you've hand-selected the gold winners off each event, and then you've bred them all together so that you've got just gold-winning microbes.
Well, I'll tell you how we did this. This is interesting. You're going to like this. So we were thinking, again, we didn't really know exactly how to do this. We were new at applied sciences. We were more observing and doing fundamental science, and we thought, well, what are different approaches we could use to actually train microbes at the community level to cycle phosphorus to higher levels. And we started looking at plant breeding techniques. And we're like, it's interesting in horticulture. Basically, if you want to breed a trait in a plant, you have 100 replicates or whatever, a bunch of different plants of the same strain. And then you pick a trait. And we'll talk about tomatoes as an example. And you're trying to breed plants with bigger tomatoes. Well, out of natural variability alone, there's going to be a plant that has the biggest tomatoes. Then you're going to take the seeds from that tomato and grow that up through another however many plants and continue to drive that trait through subsequent generations.
So we're like looking at phenotypes. Is that the same? Is that the right word for microbiology? Phenotypes of microbiology?
You're actually looking at different phenotypes, the phenos that are actually going to develop larger tomatoes in this case. Well, what we thought was, why don't we treat microbial communities that way? And so we had all these soils that we collected across the country. We grew them up, and we used phosphorus cycling as that trait. And we grew up thousands of replicates of all these different soils and grew the microbes up. And the nice thing about microbial trait selection is the microbes grow up and you can actually assay traits in a couple of days instead of waiting across the whole growing season of a plant, so it can be in a really high throughput manner. And we tested all these microbial soils for their ability to cycle phosphorus. And because we can quantify that, we could pick a winner. And so out of all those thousands of replicates, as we mixed up all the soils and grew them up, we could pick a winner. And then we picked that winning microbial community, and we repropagated it 1,000 times into generation 2. And then we grew them up, picked a winner, highest phosphorus cycling, and we repropagated that replicate into generation 3. And we continued into generation 4, 5, and all the way through. We had a little over 100 generations. And in every generation, what we found is we were pushing the microbial ability, the community ability to cycle phosphorus. And phosphorus cycling kept on increasing every generation until it finally leveled off in the hundreds, right over 100 generations. And we realized, man, we pushed this microbial community to its maximum capacity. And at that stage, that microbial community could cycle phosphorus about 30 times greater than any of the soils that we surveyed in the natural and agriculture systems that we started with.
So what you've done, you've given the microbes the perfect conditions and you've hand selected them. So in evolution, you haven't done anything before anyone starts jumping on a high horse and going, oh, this is genetically modified. No, it's not. This is like exactly what you do with plants when you phenotype them. But all we've done is you've done in probably 100 generations. What, it took you about a year? How long did it take?
It took less than a year because it was really high throughput. But that's the idea. We enabled evolution to occur at a faster rate.
In evolution, you're looking at to get to that phosphorus bacteria that works at 30% more efficient. We're talking like hundreds of years for that to naturally evolve, and then they're integrated with all other bacteria. So it's just mad. You've your advanced microbe technology there, hundreds of years, haven't you?
Yeah,
in terms of the phosphorus ones.
I think that's true. Yeah,
definitely. So, there was a point there I was going to make about the way that you've cultured these bacteria. Something that people always, that with the microbes that we have at the moment, is people got to be very careful not to go over an EC, electrical conductivity of 1.5. But with Mammoth P, you don't have to be so stringent with that, do you? Because these are highly resistant to high salt buildup. Yeah,
that's a really good point too, and that's what's really interesting about this particular microbial consortia. Mammoth P consists of 4 bacteria, and I think this is key. When we started the initial generation 1 selection process to develop this product, there were over 10,000 microbial species that came from the natural soils. But generation after generation, a lot of the species died out and they reassembled. And the final selection, there were 4 species left, and those were the species in Mammoth P. And through that selection process, when we developed the technology, what it enabled this community to do was form a super robust, really resilient community that was resistant and tolerated a wide range of environmental conditions. So a wide range of pH, a wide range of temperature, And so these microbes, actually, we store these microbes at frozen -80°C for every batch. And we bring them out of a frozen state to scale them up every week for our production. We test them across a wide range, and they can persist really well between a pH range of 5 and 9, which is incredible. And they do that because they work really, really well together. And that's kind of goes into the power of the consortia. These 4 work really well together, not only to cycle phosphorus, but to persist in an environment.
You know, these are starting to sound a bit like extremophiles. These are like, are you sure you didn't go down volcanoes and acidic mines to find these? Because these are heavy cats.
Yeah, you know, it's in the magic of how they were selected. And so this was interesting too. I said that, you know, we talked to hundreds of farmers, and my eyes were opened. You know, if you don't know something, what you do is you talk to someone that knows more about it than you do, and all of a sudden you'll learn a lot. And that was true about farming. And so
I'll be honest, you're very lucky to not get handcuffed to the table before, you know. Like, it's very, like, consider yourself lucky that we didn't actually keep you here in the office. It's only because we're such good friends with Paul and Andy that he's not currently now handcuffed to the table. I'm actually thinking now whether we might get them handcuffed. Do you know where they are, Reg? No, we need to whip them out. No, I'm not in a kinky way. I mean in one of them academic ways where he can't leave us anymore. Colorado State University and Grow Sensia, they've just lost a member. You know what actually I meant to say to you before? Is that you were saying, with quite a smug look on your face, that from the Colorado State University, a lot of people have followed you to Grow Sensia, some really good scientists. And I meant to say before, I actually say it now, is that actually says a lot about you and the other 2 co-founders, about just your ethics and about you as a person, that your teams come with you. So they haven't stayed in the university, which I imagine is very nice, loads of research going on, but they've actually come with you on this journey. So that tells me a lot about you and the other co-founders of people as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the most important thing we have is our culture and core values. You know, it was honestly a really hard decision for me to leave the university. Yeah. It was my dream. It's really hard to get a PhD, and you're getting a PhD thinking you're going down the academic track. At least I was, and that was the dream. And I ended up, after I got my PhD, being exactly where I wanted to be at the Natural Resource Ecology Lab at Colorado State University. And I was like, there, I made it. Like, I was like, yeah, I'm successful. Then I was working with a great team and really successful writing papers and writing grants. And then we did this. Then I realized, man, life has kind of given me this door. And there's a door I can walk through, and it's starting this company. And
there's a lot of hurdles in academia, isn't there? There's a lot of red tape. So when you've got an idea in your mind about a difference that you want to make, there's a lot of red tape to go through, like accessing grants and getting the proposals written and going through all the research. But I imagine you've seen a way now. You're still there with your passion. You're still there as a scientist at the core, but you can do something where you can physically see a difference that you're making. I imagine that's what's took you away.
I think that's really interesting. The way I think about it is, we're not even trained in academia to think about, like, as a biologist, to help farmers. It's all kind of academic and theoretical. And I realized how little I was actually trained to think about that. So there's this huge chasm to kind of bridge over it. And now that I've bridged over, I realize the impact I can make outside of the university is
there's some conspiracy. I reckon there's a conspiracy theory in there. You know, they have the best scientists coming up with the best ideas, and then the big agricultural, like, no, keep those scientists where they are. We will take the stuff that we want to use, and we'll make lots of profits. Keep them scientists doing on their salaries, doing lots of our research for us. And then there's a conspiracy theory in there somewhere.
You know, I think that's the model, though. Honestly, there's tech transfer departments in almost every university now, and they're more used. They're designed to license technology that were developed by professors at the university to large companies. And that's the structure.
So many conspiracy theorists, and get your teeth into that one and dig it out. But Colin, you've taken a big leap. You've built that bridge, so it's just up to the scientists that are coming up with the great ideas to maybe follow in those footsteps as well.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Go over to Grow Sensia.
I know a lot of scientists write me now
Yeah.
to ask me about my experience because it's so far outside of what we're used to thinking about. And it's a ton of work, having a company, and there's always a lot going on. And there's a lot of things I'm still learning on a daily basis for sure. But it's been the most rewarding decision I ever made was to leave university and work with growers and understand how I can bring growers value and having the resources now to develop not only Mammoth P, but other technologies as needs come up to help agriculture.
Yeah, man, definitely. So I've got some questions here. Some people have been throwing in questions, but before we get into them, I want to say, and it might seem like a mad question because you're a really young company already making a massive impact. You mentioned before you're in France in 2 weeks. You're in the top 100 new startup companies.
Yeah.
And what's that event called?
I think it's called Hello Tomorrow.
Yeah. So is it a 2-year Grow Centre is a 2-year-old company? It's already in one of the top 100 startup companies.
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing, and it's because of the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
And we've grown with the cannabis industry. And it's huge in the U.S. and it's continuing to grow. It's going to be huge in Europe, and it's already huge in Europe, I think, continuing to grow. We're growing in Latin America, and the cannabis industry has embraced our company 100% and allowed us to be successful.
Yeah, they know a good thing when they see it. But my point that I was making is it might seem a little bit early, but what's the future for Mammoth P? And are you researching? You've got new products in the pipeline?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we do. We think that Mammoth P is a great solution, but there's other solutions. And really what I'm really kind of, honestly, we use the word geeked out. I'm completely geeked out on microbes. Not only did I get a PhD in it, but when I'm thinking about applying microbes into agriculture, I think there's so much room for us to be successful. And when I say us, I mean as an industry. Yeah. And it's thinking more about prescribed and precision agriculture. And we're already in the precision agriculture business with lighting and environmental controls and nutrient controls and precision nutrient delivery. But the microbes have a little way to go. And we know what microbes do for plants. They help enhance their physiology, metabolism. They help make nutrients more bioavailable so plants can take up more nutrients. They can actually protect plants against pathogens, and they can enhance plant immune responses through chemical signaling. Yeah. And if you understand what a plant needs, you can actually have a microbial accommodation to encourage that. Yeah. Mammoth P targets phosphorus cycling. When plants need phosphorus, you can help plants take up more phosphorus naturally using a product like Mammoth P. What about potassium? What about nitrogen? When we think about microbial precision applications of microbes to enhance plant nitrogen uptake, to enhance plant potassium uptake, iron uptake. Yeah. The sky's the limit. Yeah, man.
It sounds like there's a massive field out there. I'm looking forward to the next 5, 10, 20 years of what you are going to come out with. And what's really nice is that I know in my heart, and I've only met you for a couple of hours, is that I know that science is at your core. I know that something like Mammoth N, Mammoth K, I know that wouldn't even be released without the scientific method and the rigorous science that you would definitely put it through.
Yeah, I actually appreciate you saying that too. So I get a lot of flack for this in the States right now because we've been on the ground for a couple of years and they've been asking about it. And I had a version of Mammoth N that I was pretty excited about. Yeah. And so we have a R&D pipeline that consists of development, then validation, then plant testing validation. Yeah. Those are the 3 cycles. And so after it goes through the development stage, we put it through a lab development to make sure it's working well on different substrates and cycling the nutrients the way we think it will. But at the end of the day, none of that really matters unless it translates to plant growth the way we want it, the way we're targeting the microbes or developing the microbes to act with plants. And I had a version of Mammoth P that made it to the plant development stage. And it's tricky when we have a good product like Mammoth P because that goes into the testing. And so that's one of the benchmarks. You have to test it against Mammoth P. Yeah. And so I had a version of Mammoth N, and it was testing it during veg phase, and we're looking at growth. And at the end of the day, it didn't do any better than Mammoth P in that particular trial. Yeah. And we repeated it, and the same thing happened. And I realized that, I made the decision. It's like, I don't need a product that can do just as good as something we already have on the market. We need something better. And so I told the team to go back to the drawing board, and we scrapped it and we started over. And so it's all about bringing value to growers by, having integrity and making high quality products.
And there's two things I want to mention. First of all, it's me H2O2 vendetta. And the other thing is that we mentioned before as well, earlier on, that you're raising the bar for products that we can allow into the hydroponics industry. So I've been a big promoter of science and people to follow science to get to understand what's really going on, to find good products. And now that you've come along, I'm literally over the moon because I've read the papers that you brought out and I've read what you've done before you even brought this to market. Now what's going to happen over the next 5-10 years is other companies are going to have to do science, because growers are going to be using Mammoth P. Undoubtedly, the vast majority of growers will be using Mammoth P in the next 5 years. And they're going to look into Mammoth P and what you stand for. And so you stand for science and you've done these peer-reviewed journals. And these are going to be like, wow, people who weren't into science before are probably going to get into the science and be like, they've done this, this, and this, and this is a great product and I can trust them. So then they're going to look at other products, be like, what science did they do? Did they just come into my industry? I'm not talking like me as a person, I'm talking like you people listening. It's your industry. They come into your industry and try to sell your product because they knew they could make money off it. What science, what research did they go through? So I'm really excited because Mammoth P's raised that scientific bar so that in 5 years' time, for a product to be released to the hydroponics industry, they're going to have to go through some severe scientific rigor, and people like Colin are going to be testing it and saying what works and what doesn't. So we're going to have a lot more honesty in the industry, and I'd say you're at the cusp. You've helped promote this, so I say thank you to Mammoth P as well for allowing us to get to that point.
Cool, thank you for saying that. Appreciate it.
And then me H2O2 vendetta. I was saying before, and you chuckled, didn't you, that we as growers, we as humans, been around for a few thousand years, or not hundreds of thousands of years, but as growers and agriculture, we've been doing it for 1,000 years, since the Egyptians. Microbes have been around for hundreds of millions of years. So it's quite egotistical of humans to believe that we know what's best. I'm talking about the hydroponics people that believe that sterility or sterile conditions is the best way forward. Microbes have been here for billions of years, and they will continue to be here when we're long gone extinct, when the sun starts to engulf us. Microbes are still going to be here. So I just don't get why people feel like they can run things like hydrogen peroxides and clean the solutions out. To get to my point is, stop using hydrogen peroxides, which get rid of all the good bacteria and all the bad bacteria. But Colin will confirm this because I'm not 100%. It tends to be that bad bacteria, or the ones that are going to negatively affect plant growth, seem to be a bit more hardy and they'll stick around more than the good bacteria. So when you wipe them out, the bad bacteria, they're quicker to infect those roots, and you end up getting more of a Pythian problem.
Yeah, that's a real concern. Pathogens are typically really resistant, microbes also.
Yeah.
And so overall, I've talked to a lot of hydroponic growers, and the goal for trying to run a sterile system isn't to get rid of beneficials, it's to keep down pathogens.
Yeah.
But it's really hard. It's almost impossible to keep a sterile system. And so there might be a different management to consider. And what I've argued and talked to a lot of growers, and it makes a lot of sense, is just make sure you have the right beneficials.
Yeah.
The beneficial microbes will actually protect your plants against pathogens, growing along the root surface areas, blocking potential infection sites, and actually competing against pathogens. And that's how it works in nature, and that's how it works in soils, and that's really what we want to try to promote, I think, in hydroponic systems, to bring nature back to those systems.
Yeah, I'm going to try and do Thomas's job here. I'm going to try and explain it because I've just thought of something. So we're on the battlefield, and I've got 1,000 of the bad army and I've got 1,000 of the good army. Using something like bleaching or peroxide products, your armies are all on the battlefield. They're all fighting to win, and you throw a bomb that kills all of them, apart from maybe one or two. And the bad army are nearly always the stronger army. So those one or two get on the phone, they call reinforcements. All of a sudden, the bad army's taken over, and there's nothing left of the good army. So instead of doing that, we're back to the battlefield again. We've got 1,000 versus 1,000. What's much easier is you can easily will inoculate this battlefield with extra soldiers. We'll give them another 2,000 good soldiers. Who's going to win that battle then? It's going to be the good soldiers.
I love it. That's a great way to think about it.
And it's much easier, isn't it? Rather than trying to kill and get rid of something that you're not going to kill and get rid of, because technically the word sterile is a really bad word to use because it means absolutely nothing. And as soon as you've cleaned your hands with 99.9% soap, it's still about within a minute, there's probably still about 1 billion bacteria back on your hands already, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
So sterile, stop using that word and start inoculating with good bacteria, because we want our armies to win. And that's how we do it. And we're doing it with Mammoth P as well, because this has actually just come to me. As well as solubilizing the unavailable phosphorus, with the phosphorus microbes, you clearly selected some of the finest microbes through this selection. Are they gonna also outcompete any bad ones as well, just by the very nature of them being there?
Yeah, so it comes down to a simple ecological niche theory. And if you can inoculate your roots and your soils with beneficials, there's less space physically for pathogens or bad microbes to step in. And that's what you want to do. You want to have that presence. You can really, and you said it perfectly, you can never have a sterile system. It's just not possible. But what you can do is tip the odds in the favor of beneficials by inoculating beneficials. And if beneficial microbes are taking over the space within the rhizosphere root zone, then it really lowers the potential for any infections to occur, because they're fighting them off really successfully.
Awesome. So I think we'll get into some of the questions. Some of these have already asked, and we decided to save them for the podcast, didn't we? Because I ended up doing 2 or 3 hour podcasts just outside, so we may as well record them. Yeah. First question this is actually from me. Do you think we could get to a point where we no longer need synthetic stimulants in hydroponics? Because Mammoth P is working that well. Could there be a time in the future where we no longer need these booster products?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I think it depends on what we want to do and how we want to push our plants. I know that the microbes in Mammoth P and other microbial products will definitely are able to enhance plant metabolism and physiology, and so they're able to take up more. The problem that we see in cannabis growing in particular is if we hammer a bunch of PKs in bloom, we can cause some pretty bad lockout events because the plants can't take up the extra nutrients, and you want to avoid lockout. Well, adding microbes will avoid lockout events quite a bit, if not completely, and they'll allow your plants to take up more phosphorus and more potassium. Let's say that if your plants can naturally, by enhancing physiology and metabolism, take up more phosphorus and potassium, that's a good thing if you're driving for yield. Yeah. And you really want to do that as a farmer. Farmers' jobs is to produce yield. Having that balance is key. Yeah. And I think using microbes will help find that balance. Yeah.
I'm hoping you can help me out here, because I'm envisioning there's a circle drawn, and it's about the nutrients interactions. It's called the something interactions. I can't think of the name of it, but you'll have seen it if you Google plant nutrients interactions. There's a circle, and there's lots of straight lines going all around. And around the outside, there's the 17 essential plant elements from nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium. I think the arrows are showing synergistic effects, so calcium and magnesium work really well together, and others show antagonistic effects. So things like phosphorus doesn't really like being in the same arena as calcium. So when you tend to add more PK, you tend to get calcium or magnesium lockouts as well. So Mammoth P is going to allow us to, because growers, we all do it. We all want to add that extra PK to get that extra, in inverted commas, that extra yields, because we're putting more nutrients in. You're locking calcium, magnesium out, and you end up with a lower yield. So what we can do is add Mammoth P, keep the same concentration, same dosage of our PK, not lock out calcium, and just the whole plant's just going to be in a much better place, isn't it?
That's exactly right. And those are the chemical interactions that happen in soils. We talked about how phosphorus immediately becomes unavailable in soils. In different types of soils, those lockouts or those unavailabilities happen, and calcium's a huge binder to phosphate. And that's why you find calcium phosphate built up in alkaline soils all over the world. On the other hand, iron and aluminum colloids in clay in more acidic soils bind phosphate prolifically and will hold on to it for a long period of time. So we talk about the sorption-desorption capacities. And Mammoth P was designed to desorb those stuck phosphate molecules from those elements to maximize the bioavailability of phosphate.
Nice. So it's not, to answer the question, it's not about potentially getting rid of stimulants. It means that we can maybe use less of them and get even better results.
Yep, I think what we want to do is maximize plant nutrient use efficiency. And 100% is, the top, and you're never going to realize that in biology or in agriculture, but we want to get as close to 100% as possible.
Yeah.
And the more sophisticated we get, the more we collect the data, and more we understand how we can maximize nutrient use efficiency. Once we're at that maximum potential, using microbes and nutrients combined, then we'll understand how to dial back nutrients so we're not wasting nutrients, because we're definitely adding more than the plants are taking up right now.
Yeah, wasting nutrients and wasting money. And it's the same. It's the Liebig's law of the minimum, I think, and it uses the picture of the cask, the wooden cask, and each band of wood is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and the small. If nitrogen is the limiting factor, and it's the smallest plank of wood, the water starts to empty. You can't get any further. You can't get any higher than the nitrogen because it's the minimum that you've got to. So what you're saying is building this cask up so that everything's at 100%, and then we can start looking at genetics and lighting. And basically the law of the minimum means that if one factor's failing, it doesn't matter if you've got 100% on your phosphorus, your potassium, your calcium, magnesium, because the nitrogen's low. It means everything else can only achieve the level the nitrogen's at.
Yeah, this is one of my most favorite topics ever. It's a law of least limiting nutrients. And so, there's stoichiometry for a reason.
Yeah.
And the nutrients on fertilizers is there for a reason, NPK, because those are basically orders of magnitude that plants need those nutrients in, and a lot of the micronutrients and microelements. And if something's limiting, one thing's limiting, it can shut down the pathway for all these other uptakes. And so it's important to have a really nice balance. And it's a lot easier to have that balance if you allow nature to do that for you using microbials. And because microbes do that.
That's what that does.
Plants don't exist in nature without microbes, and microbes facilitate that function.
Yeah.
And I think humans can overthink everything, and in some cases, let nature do what it does.
Listen, I started on a book, and it was super deep, so I ended up just putting it away for a few years while I built up my knowledge to enjoy the book. But one of the best things I got from it was that, and correct me if I'm wrong, mitochondria used to be a bacteria until it became absorbed by the plant cell, and it's energy. It's one of the main particles, one of the main components of energy production in plants. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's another really cool topic, endosymbiotic theory, where they think mitochondria and chloroplasts used to be unique microbial entities, and then all of a sudden through symbiosis they started associating with other cells and having more success. And so because they have more success, by definition, it means they live. In biology, success means you're passing your genome to subsequent generations or growing and reproducing. And that's a really good example of where endosymbiotic theory is proven in mitochondria and cells and in chloroplasts.
And that's the point I wanted to make is when you said that we wouldn't be here without microbes. So the microbes became part of the plants. The plants produced oxygen. The world became habitable for humans. So it's literally, we wouldn't be here without microbes. Literally, like that word.
We can take it to one more level. You think about humans, and this is also kind of a trip. In the human body, at the cellular level, we're only actually about 10% human. 90% of the cells in our body are bacterial cells. And we call it the human microbiome. And the cells that live, or the bacteria that live in our skin, in our mouths, and in our gut and other places facilitate our health. And it's important to have those. And if those change, they affect our health. And so that's
why they call it the second brain.
It's a trip. And it's amazing. If you put that in perspective, microbes are everywhere. And they're equally important in soils and integrating with plants.
Don't write off the microbes, because there's I know people, some of the lads are laughing at me because we called this month Microbe Month, but I literally just I knew that they were important. I've always used them. Then I read a little bit on them. I was like, wow, these are super fascinating. So I thought, I'm going to have to really read. I'm going to do Microbe Months. I'm going to read. And it's like Alice's rabbit hole, this stuff, because you can just get too absorbed into it. And it's like, I'm like all about the microbes now. It's like I need to try and pull myself out a little bit, because there's a lot of other things I need to concentrate on. But if you listen to me, you listen to the podcast, just start researching on a basic level of how important microbes are, because you'll become a better grower as well. Let's start utilising them.
For sure. And you saying reminded me of why I got a PhD.
Yeah.
I started reading about the microbes and I fell in love with them so much that I went back to graduate school a little later in my life and I got a PhD on the topic because it was so fascinating.
Yeah,
and that's what has happened to me. So be careful.
Yeah, I'll be careful and you be careful as well. If you like me and you like reading, just don't go too far into that rabbit hole. You might never come out. And we'd end up with all of our listeners having microbial PhDs in some different subjects. Here's a question from one of our listeners who sent in when he knew that you were coming on. It's Fred Hogg. He grows giant marrows. And what he's saying is there's a big movement, giant vegetable movement now in the UK, and there's some really passionate people. And one of the people we've helped out with Nano is Fred Hogg. He calls his marrow the Nano Marrow. And one of the things he wants to know is, could he refrigerate Mammoth P to extend the shelf life?
Yeah, you can do that. You don't need to. We have our shelf life out. It's 24 months now or 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's at room temperature. And if you'll just keep the bottle, where you keep your nutrients, it's just fine. But just like refrigeration for food, it actually is a preservative. It'll slow down the metabolic activities in the microbes, and it should prolong the shelf life. I don't think you'll need it though.
You won't, because this question came to us when there was still some literature floating about that said Mammoth P shelf life was 6 months.
Yeah, so it's 2 years now. So I wouldn't mess with it. I would just leave it on the shelf.
Yeah. So for people who think that the shelf life is 6 months, you haven't got that problem anymore because the date, I believe, of manufacturers on the bottom right-hand corner of
that's a manufacturing date. That's right.
Yeah, not a sell-by date. So from that manufacturing date, you've got 2 years for it to be at its peak optimum performance.
Yep, and honestly, that data is still going. We say 2 years because we have to have a stopping point. That's real-time data.
Yeah.
And so that experiment's gone 26 months now, and shelf life's stable.
And so in 2 years, it could have a 4-year shelf life.
Yeah, you never know. I'm
just when the data
surprised. Honestly, as a scientist, that's one of the most surprising findings. I didn't predict that we would have a shelf life that long for this natural, organic microbial liquid formulation. But it's just the way those microbes have formed together.
Yeah,
that they're really robust.
These are gold-winning Olympic microbes that we've got here.
They're Olympians. Yeah.
What could we, when we've opened the bottle, because this is a sealed bottle, when we've opened the bottle, what's the shelf life? When do they have to use it by then?
I think the same.
Yeah.
We recommend using within 1 year after opening. And honestly, it's about making sure that you're just not sticking everything in there and, mixing things together.
Yeah.
And so for best practice, use within 1 year after opening. But honestly, the shelf life is still stable through that period of time. Opening the bottle doesn't make a difference.
Yeah. And if you haven't used it once the face grows out the way, you're not going to have a bottle of Mammoth P that lasts you longer than a year. It's going to get used, so don't worry about that. We've got a question from one of our one of our big podcast followers. His name's Salad Groove. If you're not on him, get on him on Instagram. He's a really good, passionate grower. And his question is, if we bubbled Mammoth P with some compost tea or microbial tea and molasses, could we increase the amount of bacteria in the solution so that we actually give them more microbes to the plant in one go? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I just want to clarify how we think about using microbes, and it's with precision. And so using microbes with precision, it's best practice to use within a recommended application rate. That way you can manage that. If you see really good results at 0.16 mils per liter and you want to push the product, you can dial that up or double that and really dial that in with precision.
Yeah.
I recommend, and there's a lot of growers that use compost in the States, compost teas. I recommend adding Mammoth P to those. It's a great solution, but adding it at the end of the brewing.
Okay.
At the recommended application of 0.16 per liter. That way you have that recommended application that you can manage. The microbes in Mammoth P will grow at the beginning of the tea. They're active microbes and they'll grow really well and they'll take up some of that space. I think if you're growing a compost tea, you're trying to introduce a lot of microbial diversity.
Yeah.
So allow for that diversity to occur and then just supplement the biodiversity and functional diversity of your tea at the very end of it with Mammoth P.
Yeah. And I'll be forgiven if I'm wrong, but I imagine 99.99% of the people listening don't have PhDs in soil microbiology. So, and the point there is that if you start brewing it with molasses in January and then you take that brew and you give it to your plants. In March, when you do another brew, you might have less bacteria or more bacteria, so you can potentially get slightly different results. And with the Mammoth P that you get, it's the same in the bottle time and time again. So when you get those results, it's going to be the same results when you use it from the bottle. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's really tricky, but when you start thinking about consistency with growing with precision means you have to have consistency.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big challenges when using compost teas is it's unknown.
Yeah.
And the consistency is unknown from time to time. But if you can incorporate consistency with defined microbial technologies like Mammoth P and others, you can start growing with more precision because you have that dialed in. You know exactly what microbes you're using at what concentration.
Exactly. And then for the guys that are in the US, for the commercial people, it's all about efficiency. It's what's going in. It's all your input to your output. So in the UK, for the guys that are doing the tomatoes, the giant veg, the show vegetables, it's a little bit less stringent. You're putting in and you're getting out, and you tend to be quite happy. But in the US, especially in the cannabis industry, it's literally every single input to the penny of what it costs is being calculated to what's out. How are you?
So in a sentence, what's it all about, all this?
Microbes. You interrupting the geek out. We're in full flow here.
I could see
Microbe month.
There's steam coming out of this here. There's literally microbial steam coming.
Sniff it in. That's
Science,
A+ science right there.
I can smell the research there. It smells as if it's been brewing for a long time. These microbes have been harvested, haven't they?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to harvest our lunch for now.
We're having a lunch break?
Yeah, we're having a lunch break.
Okay, when we come back, there won't be any break for you,
because
listening.
I can see you to your energy levels. You were going for gold there, wasn't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You
I think,
stayed for a
what
while.
have you got? Potatoes and chili con carne?
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
All
So
fed on microbes.
when we come back, we're going to talk about how Mammoth P does it work better on organics than mineral nutrients, and we'll be back in a bit.
You're listening to NPK Live.
We're back. How was your jacket potato and chili con carne?
It was excellent. Thank you very much.
You're
Yes.
welcome. It was quite tasty, actually. Everyone, the only
Definitely.
time you'll hear Liverpool people quiet is when they're eating.
Yeah,
the only
that's what we're
time.
talking about,
Every
yeah.
other time,
The room was
constantly-
dead quiet.
Yeah, it's good. It's the only time we are quiet. Right. Before we went away, we were about to mention, or this is a question that got sent in from probably somebody who understands a little bit about microbes. They asked, would Mammoth P work better on organics than mineral nutrients? And I think the reason he's asking it is because organics are really well locked up, whereas minerals freely available. Organics, there's some work to be done. So would organic growers see a bigger difference because they're unlocking more phosphorus than mineral growers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's what I hypothesized when we first made the product. It would for sure be a great solution for organic systems, and organic systems have to have microbes, 100%. I'd argue now, from what I've learned, that synthetic systems benefit greatly from using microbes as well. And it was an experiment when we started incorporating the microbes in Mammoth P, the product Mammoth P, into these synthetic grows and hydroponic grows. And what we found was that growers are experiencing at least a 16% increased yield incorporating those.
Yeah.
And the reason is because there is micro lockout events. There are some precipitation events occurring which limit nutrient use efficiency. And honestly, having the microbes within the root zone of these synthetic grow environments allows the plants to maximize their metabolism, allows them to take up more nutrients, minimizes any nutrient lockout or any nutrient precipitation, just to maximize the flow of nutrients for plant uptake.
Nice. So the academic research where you actually proved the 16% increase, statistically proved the 16% increase in yield, that was on mineral nutrients.
Yep, we did a whole series of studies, but all those early studies weren't on true organic system. They were all on synthetic systems.
Yeah. So you could actually go so far as to say, is any organic growers listening, Mammoth P could actually do more than 16% for the organic grows?
Yeah, you have to have microbes. It's not a choice. You must have microbes in organic systems. So, of course, it's a great solution there.
Last night I was just thinking, I want to do an organic grow 4 pots and an organic grow 4 pots. But on one, I'm going to use hydrogen peroxide. I'm going to do the thing I hate the most to prove basically we're going to see a really deficient plant because I'm going to wipe out all microbe life. And it's just for those people that go, I use fish emulsion. I use rock salts. I use this and I use that. It's all completely natural. It's the ingredients that I'm using that make the end product so good. I'm like, nope, not at all. And they're like, hydroponics doesn't taste as good. I'm like, you're wrong. Well, hydroponics grown without microbes, it isn't great. It's okay. It's fine. Organics grown without microbes would be super deficient. Organics with microbes gives you a good quality plant. Hydroponics with microbes, like, it's just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that's the majority of commercial growing facilities, cultivation facilities through the U.S. Mm-hmm. And I think of cocoa as a substrate, mostly an inert substrate to anchor roots. And so we think about it in the hydroponic realm as well, especially in the U.S. And most growers, commercial scale, are using cocoa or a cocoa perlite mix in the U.S. and incorporating the microbes into those hydroponic and management practices has really allowed them to improve not only yield, but that quality by incorporating the natural processes of microbes with the plant growth. Yeah,
man. Lovely. One of the next questions is, in your feed chart, it states that you should slowly increase the Mammoth P compared to using it the same all the way through in hydro. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Application rates are kind of tricky. Early on, we worked with really high application rates and that was, when I say we, I say me. As a scientist, I always thought more was better. Yeah. And all the cannabis growers I was working with in particular and working on dialing these application rates, they're like, no, man, you're wrong, Colin. Less is more. Yeah. And they dialed in all the lower application rates. Yeah. And honestly, what we find is even at that low application rate, growers that use Mammoth P see significant results. How we kind of inform these application rates is based on the fluidity of the media. For a deep water culture, hydroponic, or a cocoa mix, there's so much fluidity that the microbes can move around and they can actually kind of work very well within the rhizosphere or substrate. But as the substrate becomes more complex into really complex or more complex peat and definitely soil mixes or compost, organic mixes, there's physically more structure. Yeah. There's more complicated soils. And so we recommend adding more microbes to actually be able to work very well and kind of saturate that environment.
Yeah, man. Perfect. Lovely explanation. Thank you very much. Is it one? It's quite a long one, wasn't it? Oh yeah, it's my one. Phosphorus solubilizing bacteria work to release insoluble phosphorus into a soluble form. So would you recommend the use of endomycorrhiza to assist in the transport of the newly soluble phosphorus to the plant before it converts it back to the insoluble form? And if so, which mycorrhiza would you reckon is the best?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that's exactly what happens in nature. Arbuscular mycorrhiza or endomycorrhiza associate with plant roots by infecting them, creating arbuscules by infecting and breaking through the cortical cells and growing within the plant roots. But their value is they actually extend beyond the roots using their hyphae, their thread-like growth that fungi have. Yeah. And they extend the surface area of the plant roots to make sure they can maximize plant water uptake and plant nutrient uptake. It's the microbes in the soil around that actually do all the work. Yeah. And these fungi just transport it or scavenge is what they say, the available nutrients that the microbes have mineralized or solubilized and deliver, and the fungi then deliver those nutrients to the plants. Okay. So that works really, really well in nature. Yeah. And I know a lot of growers who see great results with mycorrhiza. And what they say also is the intradices. Yeah. And that's Glomus intradices, and that's been recently named, I think, to Rhizophagus intradices. It's the same thing, depending on the product or depending on what mycologist you're talking to. Mycology has a bad habit of renaming things pretty quickly. That's the arbuscular mycorrhizal species that I've learned does a really good job with cannabis, and there might be some others out there, but make sure and talk to the manufacturers of those products and make sure that they have data that shows that they have good infection rates with their mycorrhizal strains.
I've thought of 3 points very quickly to sort of pick up where you said there, make sure that the manufacturer's got them in there. Oregon Agricultural Department just done some testing on products that claim that they have microbes in them, and shockingly, 95% of these products either didn't have them in, didn't give them the conditions they needed to live in that bottle for however long. So they've ended up dying. 95% of the bottles that you're buying from a hydroponic shop that claimed that they've got beneficials in no longer have those beneficials in. Fortunately, you're in the 5% that do, and that was tested twice by Oregon. And then you mentioned before, one of your friends was like, well done, you didn't make it onto the list, but I'm going to double checked it again and said, completely agreed and said, yeah, they're all exactly what you see is there.
Yeah, it's a third party. It comes down to, just making sure that your claims are valid. And claims include shelf life. If you have a shelf life data on that product, you better, especially in the microbial space, you better make sure your microbes are living. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, for using microbes in management, is making sure that you're getting good product. And so it's really important to validate that you have living microbes that you're using. Otherwise, you might not get the best results if they're just dead.
Exactly. And this is what science and what Mammoth P is bringing to the hydroponic arena. It's that making sure that you're just not longer getting the wool pulled over your eyes. Like, this is proper testing. And I imagine I've got me, the listeners know that I've got my teeth into PGRs, about to get my teeth into heavy metals, testing which products have got them, which haven't, and eventually be publishing that data. There's a third aspect now. And I didn't think I'd have to do this, but checking a product that says it's got microbes has actually still got microbes. That's a third string to the violin that's going to have to get looked into.
Yeah, and it's really not easy. I mean, I have a company, Grossentia, and we make microbes. We scale up microbes, and we have decades of microbiology, soil microbiology experience, and our team. We have several PhDs, including myself, that put a lot of thought into how to scale up the microbes and making sure that we can validate our shelf life. And it's not easy work. And so our team does this very well, but we've been thinking about doing this for decades. So I think it's just hard work. So holding manufacturers accountable, especially in the microbial space, I think is just going to help everyone with better results.
Exactly. And because Thomas isn't here, I want to try and put this into the way that he'd put it into, so the bacteria way with the mycorrhizal. So to the people that are a little bit daunted by those words, the best way I can describe it, and you'll be able to say whether it's right or not, is imagine, let's say, coal miners. So the bacteria are the coal miners. They're in the caves, in the mines, and they're chucking out this coal. And the mycorrhiza are the trains, the big trucks, and they're taking it from one mine all the way up the other country to where the coal's actually needed, right up into the plant, in inverted commas.
That's perfect. Yeah. Good job.
That's that. Thank you. That's the way that bacteria and mycorrhiza are working together. And I asked the question last week, what did Gareth prefer, mycorrhiza or bacteria? And he said exactly the same thing. He's like, it's a really hard question because together is the best way to look at them, rather than looking at them as separate entities. Look at them working together, because that's how they've arrived in nature.
That's for sure.
Yeah, man. What have we got next? Oh, before we move on to the next question, I had a lovely little surprise out there then. As I'm looking at the sample bottles, I'm looking at the dosage rates, and it was 0.6 mil per gallon. But obviously, I'm not excited about Mammoth P. A few weeks ago when the samples landed, I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty concentrated. That's like 0.25 mil per litre. Brilliant. I'm made up. And then Andy there was just like, don't forget, this is American samples. This is mils per gallon, where a gallon is 3.8 litres. Like, oh, yeah. So it's 0.16 mil per litre now. So now my sample bottles are going even further. So if you do get a sample bottle, or you get some of these early bottles, I think where it says mil per gallon, make sure you double check them, because the UK, we're getting even more out of our Mammoth P.
Yeah, it's really concentrated. And I think there's a lot of value in having a really concentrated product. It lasts growers longer. And at the end of the day, you're delivering highly concentrated microbes and delivering it to the plant, and that's going to work really well. Yeah.
Well, what have we got next? Phosphorus. Oh yeah. This is a great question actually, and he didn't give his name or Instagram, no name. Phosphorus deficiency can occur when temperatures get cold, below 15 degrees Celsius, and or when the pH is incorrect. You can also get phosphorus deficiencies. Would Mammoth P help with either of these? So if a grower goes below 15 degrees in the media that they've got, then they tend to get phosphorus lockout. Would Mammoth P, because they can work at these lower temperatures, enable someone that suffers with this to get less likely to get deficiencies?
Yeah, I'll say that yes, to some degree, but you really have to respect temperatures and environment, because biology and adding microbes are just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And we're thinking about integrated management practices. We have to have the appropriate light technology. We have to have the right environmental conditions. We have to have the right nutrients, and we have to have the right microbes. And it's just like we talked about earlier, the NPK and all the other micronutrients and microelements. There's a balance, and we can't offset one factor too much without seeing adverse effects.
Yeah.
And so for sure, these microbes will persist and work very well at that lower temperature. A little warmer, they're going to be more active.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're not creating an ideal environment for your plant growth. And so think about that as a bigger picture.
Yeah. So these bacteria are working really hard to unlock the phosphorus in there. But if your conditions are below 15 degrees Celsius or your pH isn't in the correct range, then the plant's saying, hey, I've got loads of phosphorus available here, but you're not giving me the right conditions to be able to want to eat. And that's why these deficiencies occur.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. What was next question? Oh yeah, phosphorus is super important. That was the first line. So I thought I'll put this one in. There's a molecule called ATP. It's the currency for. Oh yeah, this grower. I've reworded his question. So he's like, isn't phosphorus something to do with energy? And can't you ask him about how it increases energy? So I've worded it like this for him. There's a molecule called ATP. It stands for adenosine triphosphate, and the important part there is the triphosphate, 3 phosphates within the molecule, and it's the currency of energy within plants and with humans. So in it's the currency in the biological world. So more P means more energy, and that's always a good thing. So is this a part of the reason how Mammoth P works so well, because it's getting more P, so the plant's just got more energy?
Yeah, so I have this little 2-page paper that I wrote for our website, and it's the importance of phosphorus for plants.
Yeah.
And early on, it's important to understand plant physiology. And if we understand why plants need nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium and how they're using it or incorporating it, it allows for a lot deeper perspective of why we're adding these nutrients when we are. And talking to growers, over the last couple of years, and we associate to a large degree phosphorus. That's really important with bloom cycle, and it's really important for early stage clipping, clone cycles for root development. But really, phosphorus is really important for the plant across the entire growing season. And ATP, being the currency of all energy at the cellular level, speaks for itself. You talk about DNA also. There's a phosphate head for every nucleic acid molecule. That's pretty important.
Yeah.
Every time the cells reproduce and your plant grows throughout the growing season, it requires more phosphorus to create the DNA in the cells.
Which is what the plant tells you. It's basically what the plant is. It's DNA.
Yeah. And then phospholipid fatty acids, which make up every cell wall. Phospholipid, there's phosphate heads. And so all these really fundamental biostructural, things, cells at the cellular level, plants need. And as the plant gets larger and it grows more, it needs more. Yeah. And so phosphorus is a really important element.
Yeah. And it's in this DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA, which is like tells the DNA what to do. It's like you've got mRNA. I'm going back to A-level biology. Yeah. mRNA, which is like the messenger cycle telling the DNA what it needs to do. RNA, which is ribonucleic acid, acts the same way. And the important thing is phosphorus is in all of it. Without phosphorus, they can't make DNA and RNA.
That's right. That's right. And so you think about having healthy phosphorus levels in your plants to maximize the genetic integrity of your plant. It's true. Just by definition of phosphorus being a part of nucleic acids, it's really important to have as much as possible.
Yeah, awesome. That was a proper geeky out question there, wasn't it?
There you go.
That's right. In there.
That's right.
Right, here's one. Using pH, phosphoric acid pH down, would Mammoth P microbes work to help the uptake of this? Because what maybe a lot of people don't actually realize is when you add pH down, it's phosphoric acid. It creates an acidic by hydrogen ions, so it creates the acidic condition, but also creates phosphorus as well, phosphate. So is that a type of, you're educating me now as well, I don't know the answer to this. The phosphates that pH down, phosphoric acid release, are they uptakeable, are they be able to be absorbed by the plants readily, or are the microbes going to help with this as well?
I wouldn't say readily, but a phosphoric acid will be broken down, and microbial processes will help break that down and then convert it into a phosphate form. You know that the only way plants can take up phosphorus is through phosphate. And so there's a conversion there. But at the end of the day, microbes will break down phosphoric acid to help make more phosphorus available in that system.
Cool. I know I'm geeking out so much here, but what is it? H3PO4 and H2PO4. What's the difference between those two, just for the real super geeky ones like me?
Well, it's just the difference of a hydrogen ion, and I think those are pretty transferable for sure.
Is it? That's the part of the breakdown, going from H3 or H2?
Yeah, that's the removal of a hydrogen, which happens pretty easily.
Yeah.
This is hydrogen ions, and hydrogen binding is one of the weakest bonds.
Yeah.
And so that can transfer really quickly, but that can make all the difference in how a element is taken up.
Okay, awesome, excellent. Sorry for the listeners if you really lost here. Sorry for geeking out, but I told you we were going to get more in depth on the next up and coming episode, so I did warn you. The last question, actually, before we have a little final chat about the product, is Mammoth P says that less than 50% of nutrients are utilised by plants, and this could shock growers that think that their mineral nutrition is fully available. So what happens to the other 50% that's not available? What happens to it for it to become not available?
Yeah, so there's a range depending on the management practice that you're using, and we can range from soils and even agriculture soils all the way to hydroponic environments, and that range is in true mineral soils up to 70% of phosphorus fertilizer in particular. It can be bound up in soils, and that lessens as we have more labile phosphorus going into the solutions. But we've seen this before. Precipitation occurs often, and you often see salt rings and some buildup in our media, in our cocoa, in our pots, and that's nutrients that aren't available, that collided, that precipitated, that are not bioavailable. And using a microbe like a Mammoth P will help break down and solubilize and bring that precipitate back into solution so plants can take it up. That's important.
Less likely to get the salt rings.
That's right. And so phosphate, it's really sticky. It'll stick to plastic. It'll stick to cocoa. It'll stick to surfaces. And so making sure that you're just having that presence of the microbes cycling through. Another thing that I think is interesting is just having the presence of the microbes kind of introduces a natural familiarity. These plants have grown and evolved with microbes. Introducing that in the rhizosphere, we've seen, and not all of this is kind of measurable, but looking at it from an evolutionary standpoint and just kind of geeking out in general, one of the first things really good growers call me after they start using Mammoth P, and it's, they're still in veg. They're like, man, I've been using this for days, and my plants just look way happier, Colin. And I don't think I have a way happier meter to quantify way happier.
Could we measure the smile in centimeters across growers'
face? The leaves
sometimes
stand up a little more, but you can see the difference, and some of that's just down to the interactions within the rhizosphere, the chemical interactions, that the natural interactions between plants and microbes, where they're facilitating plants' ability to increase their metabolism and just exchange. So there's something to that I think is really important.
Like you said, the plants and microbes and fungi. The US calls it fungi, and the UK tends to we call it fungi. And it sounds really weird now if you said fungi. You want to say fungi. The relationship between the plants and the fungi and the bacteria, that's been billions of years. So when we reintroduce it, the plants will always look happy because it's like a big family reunion. It's like, how do you feel when all your family comes around you and you have a big dinner? You're just happy rather than eating by yourself, aren't you?
Yeah, I think that's really cool too. That speaks volumes for nature. Like you let nature work, and it rewards you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's the end of the questions that we got sent in. I've got a couple of extra things to add before we wrap up. And first of all, it's that obviously everyone knows that phosphorus is important in the bloom cycle. We add PK supplements. It's like the holy grail. People don't grow without PK supplements. Phosphorus is also really important in the veg cycle as well, important for root growth. Is this the reason why we can add Mammoth P in the veg cycle? Because it'll help with the root stimulation?
Yeah, so early on when I was doing a lot of trials and controlling a lot of gardens, what I was looking at is either values in clone stage, veg stage, and bloom stage. And bloom stage, for sure, you see it on the scales. That's what I was measuring. Veg cycle, I was just looking for more above ground growth. And clone stage, I was looking for more root biomass and quicker growth. We definitely saw that in clone stage. And what we see is just more above ground biomass during veg stage. So you have nicer, healthier, thicker plants to flip. And you can do that a little quicker if they're growing a little quicker. We work with thousands and thousands of growers in the U.S.
Yeah.
You know, we end up emailing them sometimes just to ask questions. And one of the questions came up during one of our weekly team meetings, and we're like, hey, you know, we really pushed Mammoth P hard during bloom because we thought that was a very clear, consistent message for growers to start adopting and seeing the benefits. We knew it worked really well in bloom, and I knew it worked really well in clone and veg. And I tell people after they understood about bloom, and then they start understanding about ATP and cell walls, and like, oh man, this is good. So we emailed a bunch of growers, and over 1,000 in the U.S. responded to us. And the question was, when are you using Mammoth P? Over 55% of the growers, right around 56%, I mean, are using Mammoth P through veg and bloom. And another 35% are using Mammoth P and clone all the way through bloom. Okay. And so that's changed, I think, from starting Mammoth P and using it in veg, in bloom, and maybe through flush, which I think is interesting, to all growth cycles. And what we really recommend is at least use it in the last 2 weeks of veg all the way through bloom. If not, just start at the very beginning and go. It's such a low application rate. Yeah, it's really worth doing.
I was going to say that actually. I was going to say for the people that are buying it to get that 16% yield, and you think, oh, I only need to add it in flowering. Think about this. It's you're throwing a load of microbes into a new environment, and they've got to build the houses. They've got to be comfortable there. So the week before you flip your plants, so put them into the 12 hours of darkness, 12 hours of light, definitely add Mammoth P the last week in veg, because basically those microbes can get to work building a home, and as soon as you flick your plants into the bloom transition, they're there, they're ready to work, rather than adding them, taking a couple of days to find their feet, so to speak, and then working. They're already there, ready to work. So I was absolutely echo with that as well.
It makes perfect sense. And even if earlier on we talked about just making sure that there's a nice, healthy, beneficial bacteria community with the roots, starting it early on, they're with your plant the whole time. And a lot of our team back in Colorado, they say more roots, more fruits. That's what they like to say. And start it off, get that nice foundation, like you said.
Yeah, man, definitely. You've said there that Mammoth P and flush. That's a really interesting thing. What's the benefits of that?
I've thought about this for a long time, and not everyone does this because people have their regime and they like to just use the water. Yeah, but honestly, what we see is you can put on some significant harvestable biomass in that last couple of weeks. And Mammoth P has basically no nutrient properties. NPK is 0.007, 0.006, 0.05. So it's really, really low. But there's going to be residual nutrients in your grow medium. And those microbes will just continue to carve out what's a little bit that's remaining, allow your plants to incorporate it and assimilate it into that yield is where they're trying to send all nutrients at that stage. And we've seen flowers bulk up and hold the weight with the additions of Mammoth P instead of just that water weight, which will end up drying out.
Here's another one I've just thought of. There's a big trend now. It used to be for the people that were in the flush camp, because there's a lot of people who were like, don't believe in flush, and agriculture doesn't do it, so I'm not doing it. But I'm in the flush camp, and a lot of people do it with water. There's an argument in the flush camp: do you do pH water? Do you not do pH water? I'm in the non-pH water flush because you're looking to rinse through nutrients. You don't need the plant to absorb nutrients at this stage. So I'm like, you don't need to pH, but that's just my belief. It's interesting that we're starting to now use a couple more products in flush. And one of the products is things like essential oils. Is a product that has become really big in the industry. It's called Terpenes. There's another similar product like Terpenator, and it basically increases essential oils. But because it's an oil-based product, would this interact with Mammoth P in any way? Can you foresee any problems, or could it work nicely together?
The Terpinator is sold in the States, and a lot of growers are using that as later on in the bloom cycle, and using Mammoth P and seeing great results. This product works really well with other additives also, other microbial additives, and how everyone's test is when we ask, don't change a thing, just add Mammoth P and do a side-by-side, see the results for yourself, and that's how we've grown. From nothing 2 years ago to now we have over 32,000 Instagram followers who are growers who are actually supporting Mammoth P. It's incredible.
Yeah, man.
And so,
in just 2 years as well. There's companies that have been going for 10 years that haven't had this success. And you know what? I'm going to put it all down to the science. It's all about the science.
It's all about the science.
That's it. We're going to get a picture later in front of our big iron stand. Did you see him? I've got Einstein graffitied, and it's all about the science. So for our Instagram followers, you get to see Colin. We'll get a picture with all the Mammoth stuff outside there, the Einstein graffiti later. Was there anything else that I was going to say apart from a massive thank you for spending the time with me? Really appreciate it. It's allowed me to geek out, and I'm learning that there's a trend here now that if I need a break from Thomas in the booth, let's just geek out, because he doesn't like to turn up on the geek fests. This is my arena, and Thomas is definitely going to be back there. He's been doing this whole time. I can see him. He's got his notepad and paper there, and he's writing his notes for Science versus Skeptic. I think he's got a few things under his sleeve to hit me up with. But I tell you, next week I'm going to get him. This is the time when the scientist really comes out and squashes the skeptic.
All right,
Colin, thank you very much. Before we finish up and leave, where does everyone find you? Websites, Instagrams, Facebook.
Yeah, so everyone please visit mammothmicrobes.com. Also Mammoth Microbes on Instagram, Mammoth Microbes on Facebook, and hit me up. You can find my email on our website. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Give me a call. My phone number is publicly available, so everyone calls me. And just keep on growing and keep up the great work, UK.
Yeah, man. Really appreciate it, Colin. We're going to leave it there. We're back next week with myself and Thomas. We'll be back live as well, so that's a treat for some people. And it's Science versus Skeptic. And I promise you, I'm going to nail him this week. He's not getting away. Colin, thank you very much. Mammoth P, thank you very much. I am really excited. And if people manage to get the sense of excitement from me, just go out and buy the product or hit up the local store, get some samples. Please, please, please try this product. And I haven't been this excited about a new product in a long time. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.